Hi, my name is Allison Posey, and I can't tell you how honored I am that you all are choosing to read my book, Engage the Brain, how to tap into learning, how to design for learning that taps into the power of emotion. And being a huge fan of BCSC and your entire district, and in fact, the town of Columbus where you live, I'm super honored for you all to be reading this book because the few times I've visited BCSC, I've seen really memorable examples of how you all are bringing to life how you recognize that emotion and engagement is so critical for learning. So my goal for reading this book was to really try to emphasize that emotions matter for learning. And I think so often we think that we have learning and academic cognition, and then there's emotion and engagement and kind of this fun stuff. And we even label it differently, right? We label academic learning and then we label social and emotional skills. And really, they're never separated. So in my mind, these things need to go together. So I was inspired to write this book by, many of you probably know David Rose. He was I feel so lucky, he was my advisor in grad school. And when he said teaching is emotional work, it really resonated for me. I was a high school and middle school science teacher, mainly high school, but I had middle school for a few years and it was awesome and amazing. But what I found was I burned out, and midway through the year each year, I was exhausted. And when I started thinking about how teaching is emotional work and learning is emotional work, it resonated with me as a practitioner that yes, it really is. And that was what I was feeling. And actually, we can design our learning experiences so that we're supporting emotions for learning, and it actually benefits our learning when we approach in that way. So at the beginning, I described my meltdown. So you'll be able to hear how I had what I call my Super Bowl meltdown. And then I really try to go into some of the brain science of emotions and where are they in the brain. There are some misconceptions that there are isolated parts for different parts of emotion, like there's a fear center and a happy center, and there's just not. What we found with the current neuroscience research is that emotion networks are broad and they're interconnected and they're developed over time based on our interactions with the environment. Just like learning, we learn based on the interactions that we have in the environment. We build our understanding of what our emotions are and how we feel based on our interactions with the environment. So that was really big for me. That was life altering in a lot of ways. And, I really do argue that if we're saving our fun lessons for after standardized testing, or I've even heard teachers say, oh, I can't do that engaging stuff. We need to focus on the content. I would argue, and I think hopefully this book argues, that we can't get to rigorous content unless we're designing for emotion. Emotion is different from engagement. Emotions are the basic physiology and activation of our physiology, whereas engagement is how we're interested and how we pay attention and how we, maybe get lost in emotion in a moment. And I go into descriptions about the state of flow in the book that I think are really, I find to be really interesting. So I go into some of the basics around what emotions are, how they're different from engagement, and how there's tremendous variability. And knowing how strong BCSC is with UDL, Chapter 2 will probably be review. In fact, skip it if you want because it's really introducing universal design for learning. And many of you could probably write the book on UDL. And I try to also address some of the misconceptions that I think still are pervasive in teaching, and not just teaching, but in our culture around learning styles and right brain, left brain. And I try to give one of my favorite stories is at the end of Chapter 3, I believe, where I talk about a neuroscientist who had found the genes, or was working with identifying the genes for violent behavior and the brain patterns for violent behavior, and trying to think about how he could identify sociopaths. And what he found out, this is great, is that his brain and his genes were actually like that of a sociopath. But the environment also plays a really critical piece in how those genes or those brain networks are activated or not. So he was not, at this point, he has not yet, he was not a sociopath because he didn't have that environmental piece. So learning is always that interaction of the environment with the individual. So I really try to get into some examples of that nature nurture. That can be really interesting. Let's see, I talk about attention a little bit, and how attention is really guided by emotion. We don't just have stimuli from the environment coming into our nervous system, but in fact, our nervous system is actively predicting what we see. And so if you think about that in terms of our classrooms, what students are predicting in terms of their skill or their background experience, or how much they feel like they're liked or not liked, or how much they're maybe fighting with their buddy, or what they are experiencing, they actually project into the environment, and that impacts, how they perceive for there to be resources. It directs their attention. There's a chapter in here on memory, and just thinking about how some people seem to be able to just remember, like there's a gentleman who's memorized pi to 22,500 places. How is he doing that? Does emotion play a role in that? And if so, how? I specifically dive into working memory. So working memory is something that I actually wrestle with. I have very poor working memory, but like anything, there are scaffolds that we can use to learn how to support those working memory skills. And so I really try to break down the 3 components of working memory to help us think about how our classroom practices can scaffold working memory. At the end, I get into intrinsic motivation and self-determination theory, and flow, and then conclude returning to think about us as teachers. So the middle of the book is really focusing on our practice as educators and how we can design our classroom spaces and how we can think about what we're already doing. I am going to say there are probably not any new strategies in here that you don't already know, but I hope what's different is the way you think about those strategies and make them available or not in your learning environments. So I close at the end, returning to us thinking about educators and teachers in our schools and what we can do to better design, or not better, but just more strategically design our workspaces for us to be able to do our best learning and teaching. So please reach out to me at any point if you have any questions. I'm Allison Posey. Rhonda, George, many of you have my email already, but please reach out, aposey@cas.org. You can always find me on Twitter at Allison A. Posey. I have a website. I'll pull it up. It's new, so I don't think it's just AllisonPosey.com. You can't even see the whole screen. So please be in touch should you have any questions, and I hope you enjoy this journey and share what impact it might have on your practice or not, or what you're already doing that seems to align with what you've learned about emotions, learning, and the brain. Thank you so much. Bye.